Welcome to Best Picture This, where it is always Oscar season. I'm Mike.
And I'm Brian. In this show, we reevaluate every Best Picture nominee from the 21st century and decide whether to keep it or kick it from its Oscar pedestal.
And some days we talk about light, feel-good movies.
Like this one.
Other days we talk about Babel. So in 2006, the nominees for Best Picture were The Queen, Little Miss Sunshine, Letters from Iwo Jima, The Departed, and today's movie Babel, directed by Alejandro Inarritu. Did I pronounce that right?
Inarritu, I think.
Here's the trailer.
I don't know.
Richard, why did we come here? Alone.
In the beginning, all the Lord's people from all parts of the world spoke one language. Nothing they proposed was impossible for them.
What's wrong? Wife's been hurt. Is anybody a doctor? Is there a doctor? Help! Come here. I need your help.
But fearing what the spirit of man could accomplish, the Lord said, "Let us go down and confuse their language so that they may not understand one another's speech."
I need to call my embassy.
Where are you?
Where are we? I don't know. I don't know.
The shooting of an American tourist has sparked an international incident.
It's all over the news. Everybody is paying attention. We're doing everything we can.
I want to talk to the kids. I want to talk to them.
This is an emergency. Cancel your son's wedding.
Can anyone come to take care of the kids?
Listen, this is urgent, okay?
Where are you headed today?
Mexico?
Who are they?
I'm in charge of them.
Sir, I'm going to ask you to step out the vehicle.
Why?
You will step out the vehicle.
Can I explain? They refuse to acknowledge that this was an act of terrorism.
We will find these people, whoever they are. We will find them.
Yikes.
As if the title weren't heavy-handed enough.
Yeah. They just come right out.
The title doesn't bother me that much, but it's like borderline, I'm preaching.
Mm-hmm.
Borderline, but barely under the limit to me, which makes it kind of a struggle of a title, not a strong one. But to put that voiceover on top of the trailer, it's like trying to whack you over the head.
A lot of that music too, not in the movie. A lot on the cutting room floor, it seems like.
The music is quite good in this movie. Gustavo Santaolalla made the music. The original score, he was nominated for an Oscar for it. The director of photography was Rodrigo Prieto. You might remember that duo of Santaolalla and Prieto from Brokeback Mountain.
Nice.
Iñárritu uses them in other movies as well. So this movie was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director also, Best Supporting Actress, 2 Best Supporting Actress, Adriana Barraza and Rinko Kikuchi, who were the...
Amelia?
Yes, the Mexican housekeeper and the teenage Japanese girl.
Okay.
They were both nominated for Best Supporting Actress. I'd be curious to analyze Cate Blanchett's movies for who in those movies ever was nominated for Best Acting and not her. That'd be kind of interesting. Although she was good in this movie.
She does a lot of bleeding.
She does.
Doesn't do a whole lot of talking.
A lot of almost fainting.
Yeah.
Best Original Screenplay nominated, film editing and score for Santaolalla. I always have to read that out. That was the only Oscar that it won, by the way, the original score it won.
Okay.
Babel went on to win motion picture in the drama category at the Golden Globes. So
kind of a front runner heading into Oscars.
It was a front runner for sure. The budget was $25 million, box office $135, which is pretty darn good considering how much of a downer the movie is most of the time. It's pretty heavy. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 69, which is kind of interesting. I kind of figured that this would have been a little bit higher. Have you saw this movie before, right?
I believe in theater, yeah.
I saw this movie before also, not in theater, but I remember coming away from it thinking that it was kind of like eye-opening, this movie for me. It felt a little more heavy-handed this time around. I don't know. What did you think? As far as like the first and the second watch, or however many times you've seen it in between?
Yeah, this was the second.
Yeah.
I did not like it as much this time
that's
around.
Did you like it more the first time, though? I mean, obviously from what you said, but
I did.
How much did you like it the first time?
It was one of those movies where I was impressed by it the first time that I saw it. And I don't want to sort of discount my opinions from when I was younger and say like, well, I was just getting into movies then.
I think they're
what did I
usually
know?
kind of, overrated. Your earlier opinions.
Always, for sure. But I do think that there's a little bit of a layer of that, because when you're kind of just breaking into movies, this idea that you can have this sprawling ensemble cast, stories from different parts of the world, and have them try to connect, that seems new when you're used to seeing very sort of basic
fairy tale
narrative structures.
Type of narrative structures.
Yeah. So it was impressive the first time around, and maybe that's a Freudian slip because it's depressing the second time around.
It is. Coming up in the show, we will ask each other 3 questions each that are guaranteed to produce golden takes. We'll talk trivia, and then we will reveal if it's a keep or kick. Okay. So question 1. So
starting with the ensemble cast.
Yes.
Converging narratives and themes that explore the biases and expectations associated with race. You can draw a lot of parallels between this and last year's 2005's Best Picture winner, Crash. Neither of us loved Crash. I think that's safe to say. So I'm curious how this one spoke to you in comparison. And if you liked it more, where did it succeed where Crash failed?
I will say that it was very different. I mean, again, the first time I saw Crash, I think I was a little bit down on it because I felt like it was almost like a pop version of what this is doing. Yep. Even though I watched them in reverse order. Like I think I watched Babel first and then Crash, all on home video. But yeah, this is kind of more of an art film, is built more for the mainstream, but they're both doing the same they're
thing.
Very similar. I agree. And I really liked, I felt like because there was a little bit of, it seems odd to say this, but there's a little bit more of play, a tiny bit of play in Crash compared to this.
Play like
I don't know about play. Maybe
melodrama.
That's
it's louder.
Yes,
the melodrama is tuned up in Crash.
There's a layer of artificiality to Crash that is not there with this.
Yes.
This is almost like documentary flavor compared to Crash, at least.
Yeah.
And I think my feeling about Babel was I still greatly admire the interlocking narratives. And I think in a lot of ways they're more successful because it's not the interlocking narratives of Crash hit you over the head with that. With this one, the interlocking part is not what's hitting you over the head. I feel like that's kind of deftly done, like the way they interact with each other, and especially the non-linear, the play with time is, I think, that was one of the things that was really eye-opening to me. Like some of the surprise that you have is like, oh, that was actually happening before what we already saw. And I thought I really admired that in the craft of it.
Yeah, I think
I don't know if I'm answering your question exactly.
Yes and no.
But we're both talking about academic, theoretical sort of reactions to it. And I think that is kind of a way to sum up a little bit of my takeaways from both of them is like, I think in some ways, neither one of them, some of that sort of got in the way, I guess, from my emotional reaction to it. Did you?
They're definitely both going for something that appears to be academic. I don't really know if they reach that high of brow that they're going for. Crash, definitely not. I like this more than Crash.
To clarify, what I'm saying is we are talking about structure, not character and emotion.
Yes.
As our first reaction, this is what we're going for. That's my first question is this. The structure is nonlinear and it bounces between multiple storylines. What does that accomplish? That's the first thing we're both bringing up. I think that it's almost like, is that sort of an indication, or does that indicate for you like that it was a little bit more of an intellectual exercise rather than emotional exercise, this movie?
Yeah. I would say that's fair. For a movie that has such kind of, everybody's miserable in this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's everybody is suffering in one way or another, and to not come away from that feeling any of those particular scenes deeply is a little bit of an issue, I think. You know, when a movie is trying to make you feel so much, especially Crash, and doesn't really hit the mark. I think with Crash, what this movie does better though is the connectedness in Crash. It hinges on coincidence, and those reversals are supposed to shock us. In this, there's not really coincidences. There's kind of just broad, vague connections, and that reflects the complexity of the natural world, more realistically, I think.
Yeah, I agree. This one feels like when you realize the connectedness, it rings true. And I think that the connections are successful. But it's more, I don't know. I keep coming back to 9 Lives. I mentioned this in Crash. Did you see 9 Lives?
No, I don't think so.
It's essentially 9 short films.
Okay.
So it's kind of like this, and then you go to Crash with 5, and then you go to 9 Lives with 9 of them. And it's really impressive how like you have this quick shift of emotion, and it's like, wow. But then it happens again and again and again, and it starts to feel like what before felt so fresh and exciting now starts to feel almost like formulaic because it's happening 9 times, in 2 hours. And but those, I think you could like package all 3 of those together and analyze what works and what doesn't.
So for what it's worth, Crash has a 74 on Rotten Tomatoes, and this has a 69. So this is lower for whatever that's worth on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't think a whole lot.
We know it matters a lot.
But I think that you might be able to draw from this movie that, Crash won the Oscar, and now Inarritu is trying to do the same thing, but he's not. That's not fair, because
I don't think so either.
It's not new to him. He also did it in Amores Perros, that's 2000, and 21 Grams is 2003.
I have not seen either of those, by the way. So I'm coming into Inarritu sort of blind. I did see his later movies.
Yeah, you like his late stuff, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I've seen them all. It's been a while since I've seen Amores Perros, but I remember I really liked that back in the day. But it's this idea of taking a lot of short stories and putting them together to kind of make one big one. But in Babel, it seemed like critics are kind of getting over that technique a little bit. And what you were just talking about is it seems a little formulaic. I think from some of these reviews I was reading, I think critics were feeling the same way. So Peter Bradshaw of Guardian called Babel extraordinarily overpraised and overblown, a middlebrow piece of near nonsense. That's
going way too far.
It's pretty harsh.
That's way too far.
But then Mark Holcomb of Time Out says, Inarritu's latest sprawling, dispersed art film blockbuster prompts a question. Does he just not know how to tell a story? And I mean, that also harsh, but I think in a way it is a little bit fair, because we're kind of impressed by, we have this story over here and that story over there, and they're all sort of connected. But if we're not really feeling that emotional punch from these little bits of stories, then maybe the arc isn't working.
At the same time, there are many emotional moments that do ring true. Like, I don't want to say that this, I feel like maybe it's coming across that I just didn't like this movie. When I first watched it, I thought it was like a clear, like, first or second best movie of the year to me.
Okay.
And now it's like, it's definitely slipped down out of that echelon. But I mean, Brad Pitt and Cate Blanchett, when they're sitting under the tent and she's slapping away the ice that he's putting in his glass because she's afraid of what the water quality might be like, and they're in Morocco and they don't know why they're there. That, like, how they're setting up that relationship is so economical. The writing is super, super sharp throughout. And when he is, kind of losing his mind, he's worried that his wife might die. That panic feels pretty real to me. I think one of the things that kind of like, I think the biggest problem with the movie to me is the Mexico stranding thread. That one feels the most like we're just going to, amp up the suffering to the nth degree. Not only are we going to have, this woman abandoned housekeeper who's done nothing wrong. She's totally a victim. Yeah. She's now going to wander through the desert, leaving children behind to die in the shade.
Yeah.
That part of it, it's like, it feels like, if somehow that resolved itself a little bit more peacefully, I think that the movie would take a big leap for me. Again, I liked the Japanese thread quite a bit. So anyway, that's my reaction.
I just wonder if it's
what does it accomplish?
I wonder if the bigness of the scope just makes it more difficult to package in satisfying payoffs. And especially in a movie like this that is kind of designed to be a hard watch. Yeah. You're not supposed to have fun with this, in the traditional sense.
I know. It's interesting. An art house blockbuster, that's usually an oxymoron.
Yeah.
So I have it's interesting because I wrote a novel draft at some point in my recent history, and there was like a bunch of characters.
Yeah.
And after I was done with that and it didn't go anywhere, I'm like, what's my next project? And this next story that I'm working on is one character. It's just
strip it down.
You're practically never in anyone else's point of view the whole time. And there's something that feels sort of like freeing about that. I'm only a quarter of the way through, but I've been thinking a little bit about that structural shift because there's some sort of fatigue of all these people interlocking that it's like, it's pretty dense. So, my question to you is, what does this movie say? If it's so over the top, we know the communication part is, they can't communicate, Tower of Babel, but is it saying that guns are bad? Is it saying that tourism is bad, which is what one critic suggested, that it's talking about decrying tourism because like these people are going to Morocco and it's causing this big, interruption of their lives or something. I don't know.
Oh, geez.
But what do you, do you think that Iñárritu is saying something about guns in this movie?
No, not specifically about guns.
I don't really either. What else? Is it that simple? Just like we don't communicate and that causes problems, or what else is he saying?
I think this is another one that sort of benefits from coming out post 9/11, and especially that we start, I believe, in the very first scene, we start in the Middle East, and so immediately we bring a whole lot of baggage to that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of forcing us to challenge, how we see people who live so far away from us that their perspective and our perspectives don't align at all, and then to try to put our worldview on top of them to make sense of their actions, it's the wrong approach. And I kind of feel like that's sort of what this movie is circling in a lot of different ways, that we're out of our element, and because we don't sort of admit that's the problem. That's what's keeping us so far apart, because we're not trying to understand the other people. We're just like in Crash, we're just afraid of them because they look differently. Yeah. And Amelia at the border patrol is kind of the biggest part of that, right? Like, no, don't come in our country. We're suspicious of you for absolutely no reason. And then that devolves into this terrible thing, and then she's deported.
And yet they're suspicious of this guy, and he does gun it and run away, and he is drunk.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that.
But he's not doing, besides the fact that he was drinking, he's not doing anything technically wrong.
Yeah.
It's like the chicken and the egg. Like, where does this problem start, and who's causing it?
Yeah. What's your question number 2 for me?
So, all right. So, did you ever see that Tom Holland movie on Netflix called The Devil All the Time?
I have not.
Oh, man. So that came out.
I'm a Spider-Man only Tom Holland kind of guy right now.
That came out in 2020. And after I watched it with my wife, I decided that a better title might be A Symphony of Suffering for that movie. And after I watched this for the second time, I emerged from my TV room and I said, I think we have a new contender for the Symphony of Suffering title, and I think it's Babel. Dave Calhoun says, if misery is your pornography, Babel is your holy grail. So is misery your pornography, Brian?
No, I did think about Requiem for a Dream though when I watched this. Like there's a little bit of continually hammer.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. The style is so different in that, that's such a that's a showy movie stylistically.
Yeah.
This one is not, but it is true. I mean, that is just kind of character spiraling downward for 2 hours.
My third question to you is about Inarritu. So we already talked about the 21 grams and everything. In the 2006 Cannes Film Festival, there was some dispute. Okay, so the screenwriter Guillermo Arriaga, they had a falling out about the authorship of 21 grams. And González claimed, or Iñárritu claimed sole credit as the auteur of those films, minimizing Arriaga's contribution. So after that dispute, Iñárritu banned Arriaga from attending the screening. And he was criticized, like, that's going too far, you're being a prima donna. But you mentioned, I think, this word auteur in the past about, like, you see directors in that way. That's one of the reasons that, I think we started talking about movies, years ago, about because you had this sort of appreciation for directors that I thought was, admirable, and I've kind of looked into it in a similar way since then. But where does Iñárritu kind of, I mean, what he has accomplished is pretty unusual. He's nominated for Best Director for this, and he won for The Revenant and Birdman. Mm-hmm. There's only been 3 people who have won back-to-back Oscars for Best Directors, and the last one was for Joseph Mankiewicz in 50 and 51. So it's been a long time since anybody has done this. Does that put him in this sort of among the great directors, at least of this 21st century, or do you not see him as that essential?
I think you have to reckon with him as a modern sort of great director, just if for nothing else than because he's been nominated so many times. He is a big recognizable name, and he's kind of similar to Del Toro in a way that once he makes the transition to English language film, the style of his movies do change a little bit. I mean, 21 grams is similar in a way, and that's English language, but I'm thinking more of Revenant and Birdman compared to, I mean, this is
Birdman is very different from this movie.
It is, but his first 3 to 4 movies are all very similar.
Well, he called the first 3 the Death Trilogy, apparently.
Yeah. And then Beautiful with Javier Bardem.
I have not seen that
after
either,
that.
actually.
I feel like it's similar also. It's been a while since I've seen that too. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where if someone creates this much well-respected art, then it's kind of our job to reckon with it and decide, is it worth, as much as the culture is putting onto it, or more importantly, what do we get out of it? Not that it's not worth it from the get-go, but I for me, it's always kind of more of a question of what are their obsessions? What do they keep coming back to? Whether it's like fate and connectedness and misery.
I mean, The Revenant has quite a bit of misery in it as well.
Yeah, I mean, they all do. Characters who are circling sort of inevitable downfalls one way or another.
Birdman's just more psychological, I guess, than these. But interesting. I admire this director quite a bit, and so I don't know. Maybe I'll revisit Babel again in 10 years, and it'll be number 1 again for me. I don't know.
Maybe.
Probably not.
Keep it or kick it.
Well, first a little bit of trivia.
Oh, I'm always trying to skip the trivia.
Yes, you are. So Rinko Kikuchi, the Japanese character in the third kind of thread of the movie, she goes into a nightclub and there's strobe lights, and distributors had to have a health warning before that scene in Japan because like people were freaking out. Inarritu was a DJ. He started his career as a radio host in Mexican radio, rock, eclectic music. He was the director of the station for 5 years, interviewing rock stars. And he has said that music has a bigger influence on his work than other movies, which, you can always distrust that kind of thing. But Iñárritu, Alfonso Cuarón, and Del Toro are the only Mexican winners of Best Director. So keep it or kick it. I'm going to kick it, although it's still a top 10 movie for me, and who knows, I might change my mind. But if I'm looking at like what movies do I want to bring to the desert island and watch again, it's probably not going to make the cut. But I really admire a lot about it. What about you?
And I think that is an interesting question to ask. If a movie is not fun, are we discounting it just because of that? But I don't think that that's the case here.
Yeah.
I'm going to kick it also. I didn't love it, but I really liked it the first time I saw it. I still appreciate it now.
Yeah.
But I just wish that the payoffs were there. I wish it was a little bit shorter. Not that
you wish everything was shorter, but
not
so do
that
I.
every movie needs to be a tight 90, but it's just, especially when we're dealing with such heavy subject matter, it almost just feels like we're being punished after a while for 2 hours and 25 minutes.
The next podcast that we do it should be called The Tight 90.
Ooh.
It should only be 90-minute movies.
See, now you're talking.
Maybe The Tight 85.
Oh, red eye.
that.
All right. Well, find us at bestpicturethis.com on Spotify, Apple, or wherever else you listen. We're also on Facebook and Twitter at Best Picture This. And for 16 years of Golden Takes, head over to Letterboxd/MikeCavalieri.
To support the show and help pick a bonus episode, visit patreon.com/bestpicturethis.
Thanks to WNZF and the illustrious Mark Gilliland for producing. Also, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe.
Stay tuned to the next episode where Mike's name is actually erased and Brian is established as auteur of this podcast.